So
Danielle, hi.
let's see.
I can see you. I can't hear you yet. Can you hear me? We are live, and give me a moment. Mhm.
Okay, can you hear me?
Great. I can. Look at that. Technology.
Hi.
I can hear you. Can you hear
Awesome.
me?
Wow, we made it work.
We made it. We made
I
it.
can.
This was
We made
agility
it.
at its best. Like a 2-minute completely
Truly.
shift of plans, and here we are.
Well, hopefully people can get this the version. We were planning actually on requests anyway. Obviously, the idea to have it be more collaborative is a little bit down the chute, but of course people can in the comments and join in on the conversation. Yes. Today we're talking about happiness, the intersection of happiness and productivity and awareness, and how impact and fuel business. So I so much for me to Dan. Should we start off with like how we met?
Yeah, yeah. If we can even remember exactly, it was through the world of LinkedIn. Do you remember it? It's fun. We can kind of we. I think it was. Yeah. Well, how
I
did
think
we?
it
Yeah.
at least probably do on something. We're just
Yes.
like friends and now real friends.
Well,
So
I think it
love.
was funny. We were tagged, and all of a sudden we realized, well, we probably share, I don't know, 300 connections, and yeah, honest, I remember. I don't remember exactly what was tagged or why, but I do remember whatever it was. Your voice was cutting through, and I'm sure you and I both, and we all who are listening, get tagged in a lot of things, and certain things stand out, and certain things are like, all right, you're speaking my language. And I love it because we do, and we'll tackle this a little bit. We have some generational gaps, between us, and age differences, and yet we're both solving and passionate about the exact same problem. And I think that's so cool, and I think that's really where we connected. Is it's how do we solve the same thing, but we're with maybe a little different lens, in our experiences, and what we've kind of, or at least to date. And so, yeah, it's a pleasure to be doing this. And again, for those who didn't, who signed up earlier, hopefully you're seeing us now live, and we'll have to promise a part 2 because I know it'll be that good. Of course.
100%. Yeah. 100%. Well, I also want to realize that I think that's of intergenerational relationships is that so often come across someone's different age or different generation, and their approach to similar problems might be radically different.
Mm-hmm.
And the really fun part is you do get to engage with different people, different ages, and I think that's what honestly history is, that there's of all different generations in this work, in the work. How do we make work better for everyone? Because at the end of the day, each person is better, right? We're all therefore impacted by work and how we work. Part
Yes.
of the experience.
Yes, we all work, unless the small percentage of us that have an inheritance fortune, and never have to work, but kidding, of course. I'm always asked that of like, what if you had like $5 billion and just all of a sudden inherited to you? Would you still work? My answer is, for me, is yes, absolutely. I might even work harder because now I have like money I can put to good use and invest and it's funny. I have no interest in sort of just sitting on the sidelines. There's too much work to be done. So that's me.
Love that.
I don't know if it's a good trait or a workaholic trait, but I do try to keep moderation, balance. So, and then that kind of gets us to our topic of happiness. How do we, and well, number one, what is happiness? And I love the way you framed up the conversation for today. How do we define it? It's obviously different for everybody in their own way. But maybe we start there, kind of talking about just what is it? How do we value it?
Yeah.
How do we prioritize it?
I think we should first, let's kind of take a step back and just, can you kind of give us a little bit around on yourself and what you're up to, and maybe some of the stuff that you've done, and
Yes.
give us a little bit of Dan.
Sure. Yeah. I'm so excited to jump into the topic. So me. So, long story short, I joke. I've been working in what I would call kind of HR, talent, people, culture for many, many, many years. But I also joke, probably when I was 26, 27, I probably didn't even know what HR stood for. So I came into this space very, very differently. I was a musician playing in a punk rock band for the most of my 20s. I worked to support my love of music. And I was given some really cool opportunities when I was working. And strangely enough, most of those opportunities, for whatever reason, randomly, I was in helping HR teams. And one of them was United Health Group. And I had an incredible opportunity to work with the CHRO. And I'm a young kid who just wants to get back on the road and go play shows. But man, I was given some really, really cool opportunities to reimagine and rethink the entire listening strategy. And I think at that point, and I believe they still are as a company, very, very progressive. So long story short, I founded a company after that called Modern Survey. We were an employee experience analytics platform. I typically say we grew up with Qualtrics and Glint, and we were all sort of the disruptive, how do we listen more often with more intentionality, survey platform and analytics platform. And we grew that. I sold the company to Aon and then led their EMEA practice, their culture and talent practice, for about 3 to 4 years. And then took about 2 weeks off and founded Radical. And we founded Radical, my brother and I, a few months after the pandemic started. We're in Minneapolis. So it was a few months after the murder of George Floyd. So there was a lot going on, and we were really impacted for a lot of reasons. The world was changing, work was changing. There was, a lot of pain here in the city and everywhere, but especially, right here in Minneapolis. We recognized we had a voice. We had unfinished business, and Radical stood for change, stood for inspired change, and really started as a movement more than anything. And ultimately, simply put, we believe everybody deserves an epic work experience. So we inspire organizations around the globe. Hopefully we inspire them to reimagine their people strategies to achieve this. So that's me in a nutshell. I also work in film and music. So I try to keep that balance and sanity, which keeps me happy at work. So that's me.
Sounds epic.
To
put it in your words.
Yes,
I think that
it is epic.
Yeah. I think also been thinking a lot lately balance of creativity and productivity, and how you really can have one without the other. And also that creativity can come into, but it's still important to have a space for it where it's just simply for the creative essence, right? Is to just practice doing something. Like I do bracelet making, I play volleyball, which is a little bit creative, but always looking for new ways to be creative. I actually used to sing a cappella. I don't know if everyone here knows that.
You know,
Yeah,
you
woman of the band.
you you might would you like to serenade us? You just next time. I mean,
Outed myself.
acapella, yeah, you just did. I mean, acapella. We're here. It's just it's voice, well, and video, but well, that's amazing. I did not know that about you, so that's very cool.
Fun.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, in my experience, everyone has what I call sometimes that, a hidden strength, hidden passion, things they're passionate about. And it's always funny when you talk to, sometimes someone says, well, I don't have any unique interest, or it's boring. And I always say, try me. I'm sure it's not. And it never is. Like, everybody has something special about what they do and what they're passionate about. And once you get them talking about it, I mean, it's so magical. Like, there isn't, just because one person might say, well, I'm a skydiver, or I jump off cliffs. So, like, okay, that's cool. Like, tell me more. But another person might be, in their, what they do gives them just as much thrill and excitement as the person who jumps off cliffs. So it's all relative to the individual, and everybody has a story and everyone has a passion. And I love learning about people. And I think that's what also makes incredible teams and connections, right, within the organization, is getting to know each other, what makes each other tick, beyond just, here's what we need to accomplish, here's what we need to get done. Really understanding, caring about each other, getting to know each other.
I feel like some people would call oil on the wheels to keep the wheel turning. But in my opinion, and it really part of getting to know each other, knowing what makes each other's interest. It's truly together.
Yes, I agree. Your audio is freezing a little bit. I don't know if it's just for me, but I
My
think
connection a little bit
it
better.
might be that. But I think I caught most of it, and I agree. It is sort of that oil in the machine
Yeah.
of just
Hold on
making
one
the
second.
connections smoother. And it helps drive trust too, right? Trust is a big piece of this. I think one of the most important pieces of this. The more you get to know somebody, what's important to them, what matters to them, the safer they feel in conversation or in a team surrounding, the more trust that grows out of that. And with trust, we can really start to accomplish so much more rapidly, more quickly. Yeah, I completely agree. And again, all that, if you get that right, you get trust right, and you get kind of understanding, getting to know each other, that does drive a sense of happiness at work. And I think, and being a part of something that you truly care about, something that inspires you, something where you feel fulfilled. Yeah, that drives happiness. And not every day is a perfect, happy, rosy day. I would, but in the long run, happiness can be achieved. You might be frozen on me here. I can't tell. Yes, you might be. Well, while you come in and out, I'll take the stage here. So here's I think everyone can probably still see me. So as we wait for Danielle to come back, one thing I wanted to start with today is just define what we mean by happiness. And I'll do this quickly again when Danielle comes back online. But I wanted to start with just the most basic definition of this. And happiness is an emotional state characterized by feelings of joy, satisfaction, contentment, and fulfillment. Right? While happiness has many different definitions, it's often described as involving positive emotions and life satisfaction. So I thought that definition was kind of a good grounding and a good starting point. And oh, you look completely crisp and there's no blurriness. It's back. Whatever you did, you fixed
Okay,
it.
good. Oh my gosh. I'm so sorry. Wi-Fi.
I yes,
I hope
tech
so.
is no, but it's good. So Danielle, I just kind of quickly gave a definition of happiness to everyone, and I wanted to just go to the core definition of what happiness is as a grounding point, and I'll quickly read it again. Happiness is an emotional state characterized by feelings of joy, satisfaction, contentment, and fulfillment. While it has many different definitions, it's typically and often described um, as involving positive emotions and life satisfaction. So I like just the core definition of happiness. Now, how do we apply that to the workplace and being happy at work? So I think that is a great kickoff to our conversation. Um, so I can start with some. So let me kind of take a step back. I kicked off the conversation by talking about we believe at Radical that everyone deserves an epic work experience, and we have 6 elements. So when I talk about an epic work experience, well, what does that mean? And it means awesome. It means cool. It means fun. Yes, it means all those things. But to get a little more specific, there are 6 elements of this, and I'll quickly roll through them. One is a reason, right? Reason for work connection to purpose. So, this is critical, and you're feeling like there's a reason for what you're doing and why you're doing it, and that connection to purpose. I'm a huge, huge, huge purpose person. We're all in this together in any organization, and believing in something bigger than yourself, right? That's reason, and that drives incredible connection, which is another one of the words I'll talk about in a moment. Number 2 is accomplishment, right? So feeling like you have meaningful work, and that definitely drives happiness, and we have tons and tons of data to back this up. And it's kind of common sense to some degree, but I'm a data fan. Direction, right? Understanding what I should be doing, when I should be doing it, and why I should be doing it. That takes great management, great leadership, great teamwork. So direction is super important. Identity, right? Being able to show up as you are, see me, hear me, and feeling that there's a sense of belonging and that it's valued across your peers, across the organization. That sense of connection based on trust, right? Building connections, not just being connected to people, right? That's one thing. Like, I want to know who you are, and we're connected through hierarchy, organizational hierarchy. That's not what I mean. Connections, true, authentic, real connections based on trust. And then finally, learning, right? Always learning. And I do believe that if we master the art of adaptation and adapting and rethinking, that positions you to be more successful at work and drives happiness in work and in life. So that is my opening statement. So Danielle, what do you see from a happiness standpoint when you're working with clients or out there speaking? And if you were to ask the question, how do you define happiness, or what drives you to, what do you typically see?
So I think a huge part of it, and I might be breaking up My Wi-Fi is really wonky today. Um,
You're
a
super clear.
huge part of it for me is okay. Okay, that's good. A huge part of it for me, and part of why, what the happiness at work project that I'm working on now really is I've been interviewing a bunch of Gen Zers primarily first, and I'm focusing on this like generational angle as it relates to happiness and what is our relationship to it, how do we view it, how do we define it? How do we enable it in our lives? And also, how are organizations enabling it as well, and us in that pursuit of happiness? And in what I've found so far in interviewing, I really understand. One of the major themes has been that happiness looks different for each and every person, and that is a challenge for sure, but it's also so beautiful because that means that happiness is expansive. It is something that is yet to be defined for each of us, and that can change, that does change throughout our lives. And so, I love this phrase of the pursuit of happiness because, in my opinion, it really is a pursuit. And in the context of an organization, I loved some of the things that you were talking about and how purpose is, it has to be a part of, the way that an organization functions, but also you can reframe that part about reframing was really interesting. And I think it also relates to, this question of how do you prioritize it in the context of work? How do you maybe put, do you put people first, and what does that look like? And what role does, this happiness factor play in decision making? And it leads me to sort of my next question for you, which is how, with your background in with modern survey, how did you ever think of or study happiness? What was sort of the relationship or the data points that you were maybe tracking as far as happiness, and how has it maybe changed?
Yeah, so we could do a whole webinar on that too. So yes, it's absolutely. You know, classical employee engagement is a little more of the, the outcome of having a lot of things firing on all cylinders. So meaning you're psychologically invested to the organization, to the people you work with, and you're adding value, and you're productive, and you're performing, and you feel like there's an opportunity to grow, and you want to stay where you're at for a period of time. And so ultimately, if you get all those things right, yes, happiness is sort of that macro layer that lives around it. I think, I know that over the years, and really why in Radical now, we're reimagining happiness. And when we talk about, having an epic work experience, it's really beyond engagement, right? So we believe a lot of the constructs that we've measured over the years, and a lot of IO psychologists, and there's probably many listening to this, it isn't that data and that research and those models are wrong. In fact, they're not wrong. It's just that it's not enough, right? So happiness now, we know it is more about those connections. It is more about, direction. It is more about clarity. It is more about belonging. It is more about trust. And these things are so important. And that is really also where this idea of employee experience grew, right? It's not just this snapshot moment in time, how engaged is our organization. It's what does work feel like every day? And I would argue that when we think about happiness, it isn't sort of the intensity of the emotion of happiness, it's the frequency of it, right? So like anything in life, if we want to start working out and we're just like, well, I'm gonna work out so hard for 8 hours and I'm gonna get into shape. First, no, doing it a little bit every day, right? And now all of a sudden you're getting healthy. Same sort of thing with happiness. It's the frequency of those feelings and those emotions, and that is really the concept and the bigger thought around employee experience. And we've all heard, moments that matter, and those small things that happen throughout the day, from relationships, working with clients, whatever your role might be in the organization. So I think that's how it's really evolved from this sort of big model of what made up engagement, which is helpful and useful, but we kind of lost sight of it's really those small little things that happen over and over and over again. And so it's the frequency over the intensity. That's my feeling on that.
So much. And more because, as someone who practices, and there's this constant challenge of, working on your weaknesses and strengthening certain muscles. For me, it's patience. I grew up in New York City, so I have not enough patience, and it's it's something I'm working in. And this element of frequency of the decisions that you're making, the conscious decision to strengthen certain muscles like patience, is something that I'm constantly thinking about. And I can't help myself. The personal journey and the personal practice for me of noticing these moments where I might be lacking or needing to strengthen that muscle of patience, and the organizational angle that you just shared with us of this frequency of happiness, and how often can we find those moments but also choose those moments. And another theme that has emerged some of the conversations I've been having is that happiness is not just a responsibility, or really anything. These with organizations, it's not just a responsibility on the organizations, but it's also a conscious choice on the part of the individual to choose choose patience, or to conscious themselves, which then helps everyone in the process.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. We kind of I would joke, and this idea, even if you think about engagement and happiness, you have of an employee or worker coming into the office and saying, "Please engage me," right? Like somehow it's the responsibility of everybody around them. It doesn't work like that. Everything has to work as a system. You need to have a leader and a team that gives you space where you can find your groove, right? You can find what matters to you, and you can then, it's like a puzzle piece that snaps in your value. Everything about you sort of snaps into that larger puzzle. And I think that requires a lot of you, and that commitment. And so I do believe that it isn't about HR or the organization building policies and plans and saying, well, we're going to make our employees happier. It's a lot of individual accountability, a lot of individual motivation, but you also need to be inspired to do so, right? So it does take both. And when we think about happiness too, we typically look at it in a handful of different ways. We can look at it in spiritual happiness, physical happiness, intellectual, relational, so more based on connections, emotional stability, and happiness. And all those things, you never get them all right in one moment, but they're all super important to human happiness. And so I think, and a lot of those too do require the individual, right, to sort of recognize what makes someone happy. And I do think, when you talk about, how do you, for example, patience, and your thought around that, the best thing you can do to get stronger and better at that is also, ask peers and friends and colleagues and mentors for advice, right, on what can you do, or what have you done to be more patient? Not so much feedback on was I patient today, but advice on how can I be more patient tomorrow? And this is so important. We too often try to sort of gather all this feedback on what we did wrong versus what we can do right. And I think that helps you to refocus on happiness in a different way, because happiness is a future state, not not a sort of a past state, right? Right. We're always striving for happiness moving forward. So I think that's another way to think through it.
Definitely resonates with highlighting one of the things you said
Yes,
here.
I'm looking at
We can do
some of
better
these comments.
what we did wrong. It's to your point, and this is a trend that I'm seeing especially in the Gen Z space. These young professionals, we show up with all of our emotions, show up with our full selves, and we're pretty bad at
Yeah,
being inauthentic. And so when we with all of our problems, a lot of managers have time handling the emotions and handling, and saying, oh, am I responsible for this now because this person joined my team? And there's beginnings of trainings, in how to respond and emotionally support someone in the context of work. And it's been really interesting just to see that I think this element of, happiness and having it be more of something that we can relate on, right? And like emotions and how are we coping with certain things. Like it's definitely something that's entering the chat. It's entering the conversation more and more. And I think that one of the best ways, and I advise a lot of leaders to do this, is show up authentically and share, oh, this is what I'm going through. And especially in those moments, I see a lot of my friends who companies and someone makes a decision and without much explanation, everyone is supposed to just kind of follow suit. And today's age, like that's not kind of it, right? Like we're wanting more. We're wanting the explanation. We're wanting to understand why someone is lashing out, or we're wanting to understand why we need to come in an extra day every week. And I
yeah,
think that there's a lot of work that still needs to be done around that, and in being authentic and being transparent, but also in showing up as a leader and building, team rituals, building a core kind of etiquette around how we handle our emotions and how we self-regulate, and then how we relate to each other and come back to the table and have a healthy conversation.
yeah, so well said. And the word that we've thrown around, I think, as a buzzword for years is empathy, right? And empathy is such a critical word, especially across people from a generational standpoint, or people who just share different ideas on how we might get something done. Taking the time to listen is is so critical, even if you don't agree with everything, and typically you won't. And sometimes you do, but typically you won't. So it's finding that common ground, that middle ground. And what I do often when there's a very diverse team or group problem solving and working through things, and there's so many different ideas on the how we're going to do something, what I typically like to do is take a step back and say, well, what are we doing? Right. So the best analogy I can use is we're all on the shore of a big lake, and there's an island in the center. And the goal is to get to that island. What we're arguing about or debating about is how we're going to get there. But we all know that's where we want to be, and that's success if we get there. So, you might swim. I want to take a boat. I prefer to take a helicopter. So I think it's important to sit back and everyone, and I think we do have more in common than we like to believe sometimes. It's just we're going to show up differently, like you said, from a generational standpoint. Um, Showing up with kind of bringing it, putting it all out there, all your emotions and feelings and whole person, um, and other generations are a little more, you know, careful and Minnesota nice. I'm from New York too, so I get the New York thing. But then I live in Minneapolis, and the Minnesota nice is sort of a little bit of like a passive aggressive thing. Like, well, what do you think? Well, because you don't want to offend anybody, of course. But so I think, but again, if you take that step back and say, this is what we're trying to accomplish, this is what we all believe, let's rally around that, then all of a sudden it becomes a little bit easier to hear a different point of view and a different perspective, and taking the time to listen to why somebody feels a certain way. And you have to honor that, and you have to create a safe place for that type of conversation and that type of interaction.
Right. And to just summarize it briefly, focusing on the what can really help us rally around the how and make us more
Absolutely.
receptive to hearing other perspectives. I truly love that. I want to quickly go to a question that we received from Kim Falconot. I think that's how you pronounce your name. Feel free to correct me. And she says, this is such an important topic from the perspective of many companies. There often isn't interest in happiness, just performance/retention. In parentheses, you should be happy to be employed. I've heard that before. And that individual employees are responsible for their own trajectories/job satisfaction. How can we motivate companies to care about this?
So, hang on, let me just make sure I'm going to read the question. Yeah. So, I mean, no, so this idea that you should just you know, so happiness at work and having it and just feeling like being happy to be employed or not even really related, right? I mean, happiness at work means I wake up most days, I'm excited, I'm looking forward to make an impact, make a difference, and give my best, I'm inspired, um, excited, and so organizations, to the questions, how do we motivate? How do we get them to care about this? Is there's so much data out there, and it's kind of common sense. You're going to get more out of people when their voice is amplified, when their ideas are amplified. The best ideas come from typically the quietest people in many cases. And the best ideas come from exploration of ideas or different ways of doing things. So you have to give space to your people to accomplish that, and not just say, well, you have a job, it's good enough, you should be happy. Like, happiness comes out of giving folks a creative opportunity. And so I think if an organization has to tie that to a metric, productivity goes through the roof when you empower your people. Retention is increased when you empower your people. Quality is higher when you empower your people. So I think it's kind of it's pretty easy to motivate companies to care about that once they start to really see the impact that can be made.
Agreed. And it's interesting. I was at a conference in 2022, I want to say, and the topic was really on like health, the intersection of health and I guess company performance. And there's a huge study that's been going on since the 90s about the companies that have invested in like some sort of health program. So, like whether it was increasing your health benefits or employing like a larger strategy, and it kind of looks different for different organizations. But essentially, companies that invested in their employees' health
Yeah.
um, were were uber successful versus companies that didn't. And there's a literal depiction of it when you compare the stock prices of those companies, like kind of all factored in together. And I can find the name of that study, but it was super interesting. And I think, health is just one piece of the happiness machine. I think it's just one part. I'm definitely a happier person because I work out personally, but I'm also a happier person because I have aligned my values to my career, and that's another thing that we'll talk about in another episode of Happy at Work talks. But it's there's all these different angles that you can really look at happiness from, and that's what we're here to truly uncover. And thank you, Dan, for giving us one great example and a lot of great great content. And it's been such an incredible conversation. Sorry for the technical difficulties. The first one is always kind of the toughest, so I guess that makes sense. But I guess to close out the conversation, maybe let's hear your final thoughts around your own personal happiness. How have you really enabled yourself to find happiness at work, especially in this next chapter? And how might that have looked different, from before as to now?
I love that question. I'll try to keep it brief. So I, I think I'll just kind of leave it at the surrounding yourself with incredible people drives my happiness more than anything. Um, so I think any leader, any organization that thinks about happiness, there's a sense of being individually being happy, and those things you need. There's obviously things you need to take care of on your own, and that's you, and that's personal life, and we all struggle with ups and downs, and that's life. But in the organizational context and being an entrepreneur, I know I would not be here today having this amazing conversation with you if not for the people that I surrounded myself around, the mentors I had, and the incredible employees who believed in what I believed just as much as I believed in it. And, that's magic. And that drove my happiness through the roof. And so now, as I don't even know how old I am, 53, I think, 54, right around there. I always, you lose count eventually. I know just the importance of that, right? And to see others thrive around me drives my happiness. And then I guess the final thing would just be balance, right? I mean, take care of yourself. Health is so important. I've been blessed with that. I do just like you. I work out. I stay healthy. I eat healthy. I do everything I can to stay healthy. Obviously, there's certain things in life out of our control with that, but take care of yourself. Get your rest. Recognize that things can wait sometimes. It's okay to say no sometimes. And I'm trying to do a better job of that. Certainly, my 30-year-old self was the type of entrepreneur that would sleep in the office all night long, right? And it worked. But that gave me happiness then too. So it's all about where you are in your life. But I can say now, I think a more fulfilled, balanced approach to how you show up. Give yourself time. Give yourself space. Remember, you have one family. You have one mom. You have one dad. If they're still around, you have. Take care of those things in your life and pay attention to those things in your life, and that will only make you stronger and better at your personal pursuits. So that would be my answer.
Love that. Focus on how you show up for yourself, and then focus on how you show up for others, and how it really fuels your sense of fulfillment and happiness. Really,
it's like the oxygen mask in a plane, right? You have to put it on first so you can breathe, and then only then can you help those around you.
Right.
That's kind of the easiest best analogy.
Yeah, I love that. Well, looks like we got an interview request for us both to be on a podcast. Thanks to David. So I guess we'll be doing this again soon.
Perfect. Yeah, Dan,
But
thank you.
truly, if anyone who's tuning in wants to drop a suggestion for a topic that we should cover on future Happy at Work talks, I'd be happy to bring Dan back to talk about his rock star lifestyle and
That's
what
a
it
whole nother conversation.
literally how he balances his double life as a rock star and a founder and CEO of a company. But and then maybe we'll do a LinkedIn Live performance of me and you, right?
Oh, yes, yes, we need to hear that. I'm not gonna let that one go.
That's
It'll has to
hilarious.
happen.
I think I did sing on a podcast one time, like briefly, and I don't think I've done it since. It was maybe 2 years ago. So if anyone wants to go find that, feel
Oh, well,
free. Um, if I have any really committed fans. But anyway, I really appreciate you being on, and thanks again for bearing with the technical difficulties and helping me get started. Follow Dan, connect with him on LinkedIn, Dan Riley, and follow me, hopefully. And stay tuned for more Happy at Work talks. So
great.
thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone, and
All right.
love the happy at work. Thank you for what you do, Danielle. It's awesome. Your voice
Thank
is
you.
strong, and keep doing it. So thank you, everyone, and thank you. Have an
All right.
amazing
Bye.